Tonight, a woman will destroy her life with 3 simple words. She doesn't know that the man she loves holds a secret that could kill her. She doesn't know that her declaration of love will ignite a years-long battle between power and love. And she certainly doesn't know that when she walks out of that room, she will become the target of the world's most dangerous men. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment on the city you're watching to let me know how far my story has come. Rain didn't fall on Manhattan that Tuesday night. It attacked. Fat drops hammered the glass walls of Blackthorn Global Tower like bullets, turning the city 52 floors below into a smeared painting of brake lights and neon signs bleeding into darkness. Inside Lucian Draven's private office, the storm was just white noise behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass. Celine Vale stood near the window, watching water streak downward in jagged rivers. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and sharp-edged in the dim light. 29 years old, executive assistant to the most dangerous man in American corporate warfare, and currently making the worst decision of her life. Behind her, Lucien sat at his desk reviewing acquisition documents for a pharmaceutical merger worth $800 million. His fountain pen moved across the pages with mechanical precision. He hadn't looked up in 6 minutes. Celine knew because she'd been counting. 742 days she'd worked for him. 2 years of 18-hour workdays, midnight flights to Tokyo and Geneva, coffee orders memorized down to the temperature, security codes committed to memory, and silence. So much silence. The kind of silence that taught you how to read a man without him saying a word. She knew what it meant when he loosened his cufflinks before a conference call. Someone was about to lose everything. She knew the exact angle of his jaw when he was 3 moves ahead in a negotiation. She knew how many seconds of quiet meant irritation versus genuine consideration. And she knew, had known for months, maybe longer, that she was in love with him. It was the stupidest thing she'd ever felt. Lucien Draven wasn't a man you fell in love with. He was a force you survived. At 42, he'd built an empire on the bones of companies he'd gutted, politicians he'd bought, and enemies who'd learned too late that crossing him was a terminal mistake. People whispered his name in Senate hallways like an incantation. Banking executives went pale when he entered a room. He wore $15,000 suits like armor. His office smelled like leather, old wood, and something darker, power maybe, or just the particular scent of a man who'd stopped pretending to be human somewhere along the way. Celine had never seen him laugh, not once in 2 years. She'd seen him destroy a competitor's entire retirement fund with 3 phone calls and then order sushi for lunch without changing expression. She'd watched him negotiate a hostile takeover while a man across the table literally wept. Lucien had slid a box of tissues across the mahogany and kept talking numbers. He was brutal, controlled, untouchable. And she loved him so completely it made her teeth ache. The pen stopped moving. "You've been standing there for 7 minutes," Lucien said without looking up. His voice was low, textured like smoke over gravel. "Either you need something or you're planning my murder. Which is it?" Celine's hands were shaking. She shoved them into the pockets of her tailored black slacks. "Neither." "Then sit down. You're making the room feel unbalanced." She didn't sit. Couldn't. If she sat down, she'd lose her nerve, and she'd been building toward this moment for weeks. Months. Maybe since the first day she'd walked into this office, and he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "I need to tell you something," she said. Lucien finally glanced up. His eyes were steel gray, the color of winter oceans. They didn't soften when they landed on her. They never softened. "Professional or personal?" "Personal." "Then it can wait until morning." "No," Celine said, and her voice came out rougher than she intended. "It can't." Something shifted in his expression. Not concern, Lucien Draven didn't do concern, but attention. The same razor-focused attention he gave to merger contracts and offshore account statements. He set down the pen, leaned back in his chair, and folded his hands across his stomach. "You have 2 minutes," he said. Celine's heart was a war drum against her ribs. Thunder cracked somewhere over the East River. The lights of Manhattan stretched out behind Lucien like a kingdom he'd conquered single-handedly, and maybe he had. "I'm in love with you," she said. The words dropped into the room like stones into deep water. Lucien didn't move, didn't blink. His face remained perfectly, terrifyingly blank. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. The silence stretched so tight, Celine thought it might snap and cut her throat. Then he smiled. It was the worst thing he could have done. Not a real smile, nothing warm or surprised or even angry, just a slow, cold curl of his mouth that made him look like a king watching a peasant beg for mercy. "Say that again," he said quietly. Celine's stomach dropped. "You heard me. I want to hear you say it again." "Why?" "Because I need to be certain," Lucian said, still wearing that horrible smile, "that you understand what you just did." The room felt smaller suddenly, colder. Celine took a step back and her spine hit the window. Rain hammered against the glass behind her skull. "I understand perfectly," she said, fighting to keep her voice level. "I've been working for you for 2 years. I know you better than anyone in your life. And I'm in love with you. That's the truth. Do with it what you want." Lucien stood up. He moved like a predator, all controlled grace and coiled violence. He crossed the office in 4 strides and stopped 3 feet away from her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You know nothing about me," he said softly. "I know enough. You know what I let you see? You know the version of me that signs your paychecks and sends you home at midnight. You don't know what I am when the lights go out." Celine lifted her chin. "Then tell me." "No." "Why not?" Lucian's jaw tightened. For just a second, one flicker of a moment, something raw and almost human crossed his face. Then it was gone, buried under that glacial control. "Because you're my assistant," he said, "and this conversation is over." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." He turned away, walked back to his desk, and picked up his pen like the last 60 seconds hadn't happened. "Go home, Celine, sleep this off. Tomorrow we'll pretend you never said anything." Rage ignited in her chest. 2 years of swallowing her pride, 2 years of watching him cut people apart without flinching, 2 years of loving a man made of ice and knives, and he was dismissing her like she was a drunk secretary who'd gotten too familiar at the Christmas party. "You're afraid," she said. Lucien's hand froze mid-signature. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're afraid." He looked up slowly. There was something dangerous in his eyes now, something that would have made a smarter woman shut her mouth and run. Celine wasn't feeling particularly smart. "I've seen you destroy billion-dollar corporations without breaking a sweat," she continued. "I've watched you stare down federal investigators and senators and CEOs twice your age, but right now, you look terrified." "Go home," Lucien said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an executioner's blade. "Now." "Why? What are you so afraid of?" "Celine, is it me? Are you afraid of me?" Lucien slammed the pen down hard enough that it cracked against the desk. The sound made Celine flinch, but she didn't move. He stood up again, and this time when he crossed the room, there was nothing controlled about it. He stopped inches away from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "You want the truth?" he said, and his voice was ragged now, fraying at the edges. "Fine. Here's the truth. You walked into my office 2 years ago, and I knew the first time I looked at you, that you were going to be a problem, because you're smart. Too smart. And you see things other people miss. And every single day you sit outside my office, you get closer to figuring out what I really am." "And what are you?" "Dangerous," Lucien said. "To you. To anyone who gets close to me. This isn't fear, Celine. It's self-preservation, mine and yours." "I don't need you to protect me." "Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet." Thunder shook the building. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Celine could feel her pulse in her throat, her wrists, behind her eyes. She was close enough to Lucien that if she leaned forward 6 inches, she could kiss him. She didn't. "I'm not some fragile thing that's going to break," she said. "I've survived worse than you." Lucien laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, you haven't. Try me." For a long moment, he just stared at her, really looked at her like he was seeing past her face and into something deeper. Then he stepped back, and the distance between them felt like a canyon. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "you're going to wake up and realize what a mistake this was. You're going to be embarrassed and professional, and we'll never speak of it again. That's how this ends. And if I don't, then you're fired." The words hit like a physical blow. Celine's breath caught in her chest. "You'd fire me for telling you the truth?" "I'd fire you to save your life. Lucian said, "and you'd hate me for it. But you'd be alive to hate me, and that's all that matters." He walked back to his desk, picked up his jacket from the chair, and headed for the door. He didn't look at her as he passed, didn't slow down, just kept moving like she was already gone. "Lucienne," Celine said. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob, didn't turn around. "I meant what I said." "I know," he said quietly. "That's the problem." Then he left. Celine stood alone in his office for a long time after the door closed. Rain pounded against the windows. The city stretched out below her, oblivious and endless. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, and she looked small, breakable. She'd just told the most powerful man she knew that she loved him, and he'd looked at her like she'd signed her own death warrant. Maybe she had. Celine didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment in Brooklyn, a cramped one-bedroom with a radiator that clanged like a ghost and a view of a brick wall, and stared at her phone. No calls. No texts. Nothing. At 3 a.m, she opened a bottle of wine and poured herself a glass. Then she poured it down the sink because drinking alone felt too pathetic even for this. By 4 a.m, she'd convinced herself that showing up to work tomorrow was impossible. By 5, she'd decided she had to. By 6, she was in the shower trying to scrub the humiliation off her skin. She wore her sharpest suit, black Armani, the one that made her feel like she could negotiate treaties or murder someone and get away with it. She did her makeup with surgical precision, war paint, armor. When she walked into Blackthorn Tower at 7:30, the lobby security guard gave her the same nod he always did. The elevator carried her up to the 52nd floor in silence. The doors opened. Lucian's office was dark. Celine stood in the hallway for a full minute, staring at the closed door. He was always here by 7. Always. Rain or shine, holiday or crisis, Lucian Draven was at his desk before anyone else arrived. She walked to her own desk, a clean glass surface positioned just outside his office like a sentry post, and logged into her computer. Her calendar was empty except for one entry, 9 a.m., meeting with LD, conference room 7. No details, no agenda, just a time and a room. Celine's stomach twisted. The next 90 minutes were torture. She answered emails on autopilot, rescheduled 2 calls, and approved expense reports without reading them. Her coffee went cold on her desk. Every time the elevator dinged, her heart jumped. At 8:55, she stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked to conference room 7. Lucien was already inside. He stood at the window with his back to the door, hands in his pockets, looking out over Manhattan in full daylight. The storm had passed. The city looked scrubbed clean, all glass and steel gleaming under a pale November sky. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Celine closed it. The lock clicked with a finality that made her ribs ache. "Sit." She sat. Lucian turned around slowly. He looked like hell. Still immaculately dressed, charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie. But there were shadows under his eyes and a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there yesterday. He looked like a man who hadn't slept either. "I'm not firing you," he said. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. "Okay, but we need to establish new boundaries." "Boundaries?" "Yes." Lucian crossed to the table and sat down across from her. He folded his hands on the surface, and Celine noticed for the first time that he'd removed his cufflinks. His sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. She'd never seen him like this at work. Disheveled. Almost human. It made everything worse. "What happened last night," he continued, "was a mistake. Not because you felt it, but because you said it." "I don't understand the difference." "The difference is survival," Lucian said. "Feelings are private. Words make them real. Real things can be used against you." Celine leaned forward. "Used by who?" "People you'll never meet. People who would hurt you to get to me." "I still don't understand what you're talking about." Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table. Celine picked it up. It was a surveillance photo, grainy and time-stamped from 3 nights ago. It showed her leaving a restaurant in the West Village. She was laughing, head tilted back, completely unaware she was being photographed. "Who took this?" she asked. "Does it matter?" Yes. People who watch me, Lucian said. People who catalog everyone I interact with, looking for weaknesses. Leverage. You've been working for me for 2 years, Celine. You think they haven't noticed? Cold dread settled in her stomach. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you could be, if they thought you mattered. And do I? Matter? Lucien's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Celine set the photo down carefully. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't nerves. It was anger. You should have told me this 2 years ago. If I had, you wouldn't have taken the job. Exactly. And I needed you. The admission hung in the air between them like something fragile. Celine stared at him, trying to process the sudden shift in his demeanor. This wasn't the man who'd dismissed her last night. This was someone else. Someone raw and undefended. Why me? She asked. There are 1,000 assistants in this city. Why did you need me specifically? Lucian stood up abruptly and walked back to the window. For a long time he didn't speak. Then, because you're relentless. The first day I interviewed you, I gave you an impossible task just to see what you'd do. I told you to find a document that didn't exist. Most people would have come back and said they couldn't find it. You came back 3 hours later with a document you'd created yourself that was so convincing I almost believed it was real. Celine remembered. She'd been 27, desperate for the job, willing to do anything to prove herself. You don't give up, Lucian continued. You don't break. And you don't ask questions you don't need answers to. That makes you valuable. It also makes you dangerous. Dangerous to who? To me. He turned around. There was something stripped bare in his expression now, something that made Celine's heart lurch sideways in her chest. Last night you asked if I was afraid of you, he said. The answer is yes, I am. Because you're the first person in 20 years who's gotten close enough to see the cracks. What cracks? The ones that prove I'm not what everyone thinks I am. Celine stood up slowly. And what do they think you are? A monster. Are you? Lucian smiled, but it was sad this time. Resigned. Sometimes. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm rolling in off the Atlantic. The sky outside was darkening again, clouds piling up like bruises. I can't love you, Lucian said quietly. Not because I don't want to, but because the moment I do, you become the easiest way to destroy me. And there are people who've been waiting decades for that opportunity. Celine's throat felt tight. So what now? Now, you go back to your desk. We work together like professionals, and we never have this conversation again. That's it? That's all there is. Celine walked toward him slowly. She stopped 2 feet away, close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, close enough to see that he was lying. You're a good liar, she said, but not good enough. Celine, you said you can't love me. Can't. Not don't. She paused. Which means you already do. Lucian's expression shattered for half a second, just long enough for her to see the truth underneath. Then he rebuilt it, brick by brick, until he was stone again. It doesn't matter, he said. It's the only thing that matters. No. His voice was hard now, final. What matters is keeping you alive, and the only way to do that is to make sure you stay as far away from me as possible. Professionally, we're fine. Personally, we're done. Do you understand? Celine wanted to scream, wanted to grab him and shake him until he admitted what they both knew, but she didn't. Because underneath the anger, underneath the heartbreak, she could see something else in his eyes. Genuine fear. Not fear of her, fear for her. I understand, she said finally. Good. She turned and walked to the door. Her hand was on the knob when Lucian spoke again. Celine. She looked back. He was still standing by the window, silhouetted against the gathering storm. I'm sorry. She nodded once. Then she left. Us. 6 months passed like a slow-motion car crash. Celine stayed. She didn't know why. Stubbornness, maybe. Or masochism. Every day she sat at her desk outside Lucian's office and pretended her heart wasn't breaking in real time. They were professional, icily, perfectly professional. He gave her assignments. She executed them flawlessly. They spoke in conference rooms and on phone calls and never, ever acknowledged the night she'd told him she loved him. But Celine knew the truth. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered half a second too long when she walked into a room. She heard it in the careful neutrality of his voice when he said her name. She felt it in the space between them. A canyon that used to be crossable and now felt infinite. It was killing her. In March, she met Adrian Mercer at a charity gala in Midtown. He was a litigation attorney with a firm that occasionally worked with Blackthorn Global. Tall, warm smile, honest eyes. He told terrible jokes and laughed at his own punchlines and asked her to dinner like it was the easiest thing in the world. Celine said yes because she needed to remember what normal felt like. Adrian was everything Lucian wasn't. Open, safe, human. He texted her good morning. He brought her coffee without being asked. He held doors and remembered her favorite restaurant and never once looked at her like she was a liability. With Adrian, Celine could breathe. They fell into something easy. Dinner dates in tiny Italian places in Brooklyn. Movies on weeknights. Lazy Sunday mornings in his apartment with crossword puzzles and bad coffee. He made her laugh. He made her feel light. He made her feel like maybe she could forget Lucien Draven entirely. She was wrong. Because every time her phone buzzed with Lucien's name, a work email, a meeting request, a document that needed her signature, her heart still lurched. Every time she heard his voice in the hallway, her pulse still spiked. And every time she kissed Adrian goodnight, she felt like a liar. But she kept going, kept trying, because Adrian was good for her, safe, survivable. And maybe if she tried hard enough, she could rewire her brain to love the man who deserved it instead of the one who'd rejected her. Lucien noticed. He didn't say anything, didn't need to, but Celine saw the way his expression went flat when she mentioned weekend plans, saw the tension in his shoulders when Adrian stopped by the office to take her to lunch. Once she caught Lucien watching them through the glass walls of his office. Adrian had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the elevator, and Lucien's face was a mask of stone. Their eyes met for half a second. Then he looked away and Celine felt something twist in her chest so hard she almost gasped. That night, she went home to Adrian's apartment. They had pasta and wine and sex that was gentle and uncomplicated and left her feeling emptier than before. Afterward, lying in the dark with Adrian's arm draped across her waist, Celine stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about steel gray eyes and hands that never touched her. She failed. Fuck. In June, Adrian proposed. They were in Central Park at sunset. He'd planned the whole thing, picnic, champagne, a string quartet hidden somewhere in the trees playing something classical and romantic. He got down on one knee in front of 100 strangers and held up a ring that caught the dying light. Celine Vale, he said, smiling like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Will you marry me? Every rational part of her brain screamed, yes. Adrian was good. Adrian was safe. Adrian loved her without conditions or complications. This was the right choice, the smart choice. Yes, Celine heard herself say. The crowd applauded. Adrian stood up and kissed her and slid the ring onto her finger. It was beautiful, simple platinum band, single diamond, elegant and understated. It felt like a shackle. Celine smiled and kissed him back and let strangers congratulate them. She posed for photos. She drank champagne. She played the part of a woman who'd just been handed her future on a silver platter, and the entire time, all she could think about was Lucien. That night, she texted him, just 4 words, I'm getting married. He responded 3 hours later, 2 words, congratulations. Celine stared at her phone until the screen went dark. Then she turned off the lights, climbed into bed beside her fiancé, and cried so quietly Adrian never woke up. The engagement announcement went public the next week. The New York Times social section. A photo of her and Adrian looking perfect and happy, and completely in love. Celine saw the exact moment Lucien found out. She was at her desk when he emerged from his office holding his phone. His face was empty. Completely, terrifyingly empty. He looked at her for one long moment, long enough that she felt pinned under the weight of it, and then he walked past her without a word. He didn't come back for 6 hours. When he finally returned, he locked himself in his office and didn't emerge until past midnight. Celine waited. She didn't know why, but she sat at her desk doing meaningless work until the cleaning crew showed up and looked at her like she'd lost her mind. At 12:40, Lucien's office door opened. He stood in the doorway, jacket off, tie gone, shirt untucked. He looked wrecked, exhausted, human in a way she'd never seen. "Go home, Celine," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" "No." The word was flat, honest. "But that's not your problem anymore." "Lucienne, go home to your fiancé," he said. "Congratulations. He's a lucky man." Then he closed the door. Celine sat in the silent office for another 10 minutes. Then she packed her things, took the elevator down 52 floors, and walked out into the summer night. Adrian was waiting at her apartment with takeout and a movie queued up. He kissed her hello and asked about her day, and never noticed that she was barely holding herself together. That night, wearing another man's engagement ring, Celine lay awake and tried to figure out how she'd ended up here. In love with the wrong person, engaged to the right one, and slowly dying inside. Somewhere across the city, in a dark office overlooking Manhattan, Lucien Draven poured himself a glass of scotch and stared at the chair where Celine used to sit. And for the first time in 20 years, he let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. 3 weeks after the engagement announcement, Lucien Draven disappeared. Not physically. He still showed up to the office every morning at 7 sharp. Still attended board meetings and conference calls and merger negotiations. But something fundamental had shifted. He moved through Blackthorn Tower like a ghost haunting his own life. Celine noticed everything. The way he'd started drinking coffee black instead of with cream. The way his shirts were wrinkled at the collar by midday like he'd been pulling at them. The way he'd stop mid-sentence during phone calls and stare out the window for 10, 15 seconds before remembering what he was saying. She wanted to ask if he was okay. Wanted to cross the invisible line they'd drawn between them and just be honest for once. But every time she opened her mouth, she saw the diamond on her left hand and remembered that she'd made her choice. Adrian was planning the wedding. He'd taken over the entire process with the same methodical efficiency he brought to litigation. Venue scouted, caterer booked, guest list drafted. He showed her swatches of fabric for tablecloths and asked her opinion on flower arrangements. And Celine nodded and smiled and felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. The wedding was set for October, 4 months away. It felt like a death sentence. On a Thursday in late July, Celine was at her desk reviewing contracts when Lucien emerged from his office holding his briefcase. It was 2 in the afternoon. He never left early. "I'll be out for the rest of the day," he said without looking at her. "Cancel my 4 o'clock with the Singapore team." "Where are you going?" "Out." "Lucien, reschedule it, Celine." His voice was sharp, frayed. "That's all I need you to do." He walked past her toward the elevator. Something about the set of his shoulders, rigid, defensive, like he was bracing for impact, made her chest tighten. "Are you okay?" she called after him. Lucien stopped, didn't turn around. "No." Then he got on the elevator and disappeared. Celine sat frozen at her desk, staring at the empty hallway. Her phone buzzed. Text from Adrian. "Tried 3 different bakeries for cake samples. Come by the apartment tonight and tell me which one doesn't taste like cardboard." She texted back a thumbs-up emoji and immediately hated herself for it. That night, she went to Adrian's place in Chelsea. He'd turned his dining table into a battlefield of cake slices, frosting smears, and handwritten notes ranking flavors on a scale of 1 to 10. He looked so genuinely excited about vanilla versus almond that Celine wanted to cry. "Okay," Adrian said, handing her a fork. "Start with number 3. I think it's the winner, but I want your opinion." Celine took a bite. It tasted like nothing. "It's good." "Just good?" "It's great. Really." Adrian studied her face. "You hate it." "I don't hate it." "Celine, you have the same expression you get when you're reviewing bad contracts." He set down his fork. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just tired." "You're always tired lately." He reached across the table and took her hand, the one with the ring. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Everything inside her wanted to spill out. The truth. The whole messy, impossible truth about loving someone else and wearing Adrian's ring anyway. But she looked at his face, open, trusting, completely unaware that he was engaged to a liar, and couldn't do it. "Work's been intense," she said. "Lucien's been difficult." Adrian's expression darkened slightly. "He's always difficult. That's kind of his whole thing." "I know, but it's worse lately." "Since the engagement?" Celine pulled her hand back. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just, Adrian hesitated. He's been different around you since we announced. I noticed it when I stopped by the office last week. He looked at you like... He stopped. Like what? I don't know. Forget it. Adrian. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Like he was losing something. I'm probably reading too much into it. The guy's a sociopath. He doesn't feel things like normal people. The casual cruelty of it hit Celine like a slap. Don't say that. Say what? That he's a sociopath. You don't know him. Adrian blinked. Are you defending him? I'm saying it's not fair to... Celine, the man destroys companies for sport. He made a hedge fund manager have a nervous breakdown during a deposition last year. He's not a good person. He's more complicated than that. Why are you protecting him? I'm not protecting him. I'm just... She stopped, realizing too late that she'd walked into a trap of her own making. Adrian was staring at her now, really staring. What's going on between you two? Nothing. That's not what it sounds like. There's nothing going on, Adrian. He's my boss. That's all? Then why do you care what I call him? Because I love him, Celine thought. Because he's the reason I lie awake at night. Because I'm wearing your ring and planning our wedding, and every single day I'm betraying you just by existing. I don't, she said. You're right, he's difficult. Let's just drop it. But Adrian didn't drop it. He sat back in his chair, arms crossed, watching her with the same analytical precision he used in courtrooms. You know what I think? What? I think you have feelings for him. Celine's heart stopped. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because you just spent 5 minutes defending a man you claim to barely tolerate. I work with him every day. I'm allowed to have a more nuanced perspective than you do. Nuanced. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a hell of a word for it. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. He leaned forward. Are you in love with Lucy Andreevna? The question hung in the air like smoke. Celine could feel her pulse in her throat, her wrists behind her eyes. She could lie. Should lie. One word, no, and this conversation would be over, but she was so tired of lying. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. Adrian's face went pale. What? I said it doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't matter. Celine, we're getting married in 4 months. I know. So how can you sit there and tell me you have feelings for another man and act like it's not important? Because nothing's going to happen. The words came out louder than she intended. Sharper. Nothing has happened. Nothing will happen. He doesn't want me. He made that very clear. Adrian stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. You told him. Celine closed her eyes. Yeah. When? 8 months ago. 8 months? Jesus Christ! Adrian stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound like tearing metal. You told your boss you loved him 8 months ago, and you're just mentioning this now? It wasn't relevant. How is it not relevant? Celine, we started dating 7 months ago. I know. So you met me on the rebound. Is that it? I was just the safe option after he rejected you? No, Adrian, that's not... Then what? Help me understand. Because right now it feels like I'm engaged to someone who's in love with somebody else. Celine stood up too. The table was between them now, covered in cake and broken promises. I love you. Do you? Yes? But you love him more, but the silence that followed was suffocating. Celine wanted to deny it, wanted to say that what she felt for Adrian was real and strong and more than enough. But the words wouldn't come. I'm trying, she said finally. I'm trying so hard to get over him. Trying? Adrian's voice was hollow. That's what this is? An attempt? I chose you. Doesn't that count for something? You chose me because he didn't choose you. There's a difference. Celine felt something crack open inside her chest. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Celine. I proposed to you in front of 100 people. I'm planning a future with you, and you're standing here telling me you're still in love with your boss. I didn't say that. You didn't deny it either. Tears were burning behind Celine's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. What do you want me to do? Adrian looked at her for a long time. Then he pulled the ring off his own finger, the simple gold band he'd bought to match hers, and set it on the table. I want you to figure out what you really want, he said quietly, and I want you to do it before we make the biggest mistake of our lives. Adrian, go home, Celine. Please don't do this. I'm not doing anything. You did this the moment you fell for him. He turned away, bracing his hands against the kitchen counter. His shoulders were shaking. I can't marry someone who's in love with somebody else. I won't. Celine stood there, useless and broken, watching the best man she'd ever known fall apart because of her. She wanted to cross the room, wanted to hold him and promise it would be okay, but promises felt like lies right now. I'm sorry, she whispered. Yeah, Adrian said. Me too. She left the ring on the table and walked out. Bussig. Celine didn't go home. She walked. Block after block through Chelsea, into the meatpacking district, up along the High Line until her feet ached and the city blurred around her. It was past midnight when she found herself standing outside Blackthorn Tower. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard. He recognized her and buzzed her through without question. The elevator carried her up 52 floors in silence. Lucien's office was dark. Celine stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. What was she doing here? What did she think was going to happen? Lucien had made his position clear 8 months ago. Nothing had changed. Nothing would change. She turned to leave. The door opened. Lucien stood in the doorway, backlit by the glow of his desk lamp. He was in shirt sleeves, no jacket, tie loosened. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I saw you on the security feed, he said. His voice was rough, exhausted. What are you doing here? I don't know. It's past midnight. I know. They stared at each other across the dim hallway. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the Hudson. Another storm rolling in. The weather in this city was relentless. Where's your ring? Lucien asked quietly. Celine looked down at her bare left hand. She'd forgotten. I left it. Left it where? At Adrian's. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. Not relief. Something darker. More dangerous. What happened? He asked if I was in love with you. Celine's voice was flat, empty. I couldn't lie. Lucien closed his eyes. Christ, Celine, I know. You need to go back there right now. Get the ring, apologize, fix this. I can't. Yes, you can. He's a good man. He'll forgive you. I don't want him to forgive me. The words came out louder than she intended, echoing off the glass walls. I don't want to marry him. I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending I feel something I don't. Then you're an idiot, Lucien said coldly, because he's everything you should want. Safe, normal, uncomplicated. I don't want safe. Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet. Celine crossed the hallway in 3 strides and stopped inches from him, close enough to see the fine tremor in his hands, close enough to smell whiskey on his breath. Stop telling me what I want, she said. You don't get to reject me and then dictate how I live my life. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From me. The words ripped out of him like something bleeding. From the things I've done. The people who want me dead. The fact that anyone close to me becomes a target. I don't care. You should. Why? What's so dangerous about you that you can't even let someone love you? Lucien laughed, but it was bitter, broken. You want the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. My real name isn't Lucien Draven. Celine went very still. I was born Elijah Thorne, he continued, 32 years ago in a house in Connecticut that doesn't exist anymore because I burned it to the ground. My father was murdered when I was 17, shot in the head in our driveway while I watched from the window. You want to know who killed him? Lucien, a man named Victor Kane, Russian mob. He was being paid by a consortium of American businessmen and politicians who didn't like the questions my father was asking about offshore accounts and campaign finance fraud. They killed him to send a message. And they would have killed me too if I hadn't run. The office felt smaller suddenly. Airless. Celine couldn't breathe. I spent the next 15 years building this, Lucien said, gesturing vaguely at the tower around them. Not because I wanted money, because I needed power. Enough power to destroy every single person involved in my father's death. And I did, one by one. I bankrupted them, ruined their careers, sent some to prison, drove others to suicide. Jesus Christ. The man you think you love doesn't exist, Celine. I'm not some misunderstood executive with a tragic past. I'm a weapon. I was built for one purpose, and I've spent 2 decades executing it. And now? He laughed again, hollow and terrible. Now there are still people out there who want revenge, who'd kill you just to watch me suffer. So when I say you need to go back to Adrian and forget about me, it's not because I don't want you. It's because I can't protect you and love you at the same time. Celine's legs felt weak. She leaned against the doorframe. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to understand what you're asking for. You want me? Fine. But I come with blood on my hands and enemies in every major city on 3 continents. That's the truth. That's who I am. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Rain started falling outside, soft at first, then harder. The sound filled the silence between them. I don't care, Celine said finally. Lucian stared at her. You should. Well, I don't. Show me the files. What? The people who killed your father, the ones you destroyed, the ones still out there. Show me everything. Celine, if I'm going to be a target, I want to know who's aiming. She straightened up, meeting his eyes. You spent 20 years fighting alone. Maybe that was smart, or maybe it was just stubborn. Either way, I'm done being protected. Show me what you're hiding. Lucien studied her face for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Come in. Celine walked into his office. The city spread out below them, rain-slicked and glittering. Lucian closed the door and locked it. Then he went to his desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a black dossier. He handed it to her without a word. Celine opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, surveillance reports, bank statements. Autopsy photos of a man who looked like Lucian might look in 20 years. Same steel gray eyes, same sharp jaw, same bearing of controlled power. Her hands were shaking. His name was Marcus Thorne, Lucian said quietly. He was an investigative journalist. He uncovered a money laundering scheme involving 12 senators, 4 banking CEOs, and a Russian oligarch named Dmitry Volkov. They killed him 3 days before he was supposed to testify. Celine turned the pages slowly. Each one was worse than the last. Crime scene photos, ballistics reports, a funeral program, a death certificate, and then, at the back, a list of names. 12 of them were crossed out in red ink. 3 remained unmarked. These are the ones still alive? She asked. Yes. What are you planning to do? Lucian was quiet for a moment, then, whatever it takes. Celine closed the file and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd built an empire on revenge, who'd spent half his life destroying the people who'd destroyed his father, who'd rejected her not because he didn't love her, but because he loved her too much to let her become collateral damage. I want in, she said. Absolutely not. I'm not asking permission. Celine, this isn't a game. These are dangerous people. So are you. So am I. She set the dossier on his desk. You said I was relentless. You said I don't give up. You were right. So stop trying to protect me and let me help you finish this. Why? Because you shouldn't have to do it alone, she paused, and because I love you. I told you that 8 months ago and you walked away. I'm not walking away. I'm staying, whether you want me to or not. Lucien looked at her like she was something impossible, something he'd spent his whole life believing didn't exist. Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, brutal, a drowning man gasping for air. Celine kissed him back just as hard, her fingers tangling in his shirt, pulling him closer. 20 months of wanting this, of dreaming about it. And it was better and worse and more terrifying than she'd ever imagined. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing like they'd run a marathon. This is a mistake, Lucian said against her mouth. I know. If they find out about you, then we make sure they don't. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. His hands were still framing her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I can't lose you. Then don't. Outside, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed 3 seconds later, shaking the windows. Lucien kissed her again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the shape of her. Then he rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "You have no idea what you just signed up for. So show me." And he did. For the next 3 hours, Lucien walked Celine through 20 years of carefully constructed revenge. He showed her offshore accounts, shell corporations, falsified documents, wire transfers, every illegal thing he'd done to dismantle the people who'd killed his father. And Celine listened, asked questions, took notes, didn't flinch. By the time the sun started rising over Manhattan, she understood exactly who Lucien Draven really was. And she loved him anyway. The next morning, Cellini showed up at Adrian's apartment. He answered the door in sweatpants and a faded law school t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, exhausted. When he saw her, something in his expression crumbled. "Celine, I can't marry you," she said. Simple, honest. "I'm sorry." Adrian leaned against the doorframe. "Because of him." "Yeah. Does he feel the same way?" "Yes." He closed his eyes. "I wish I could hate you for this. I really do." "You should. I know." He opened his eyes again. They were wet. "But I don't. I wish I'd been enough." Celine felt tears sliding down her own face now. "You were. You are. This isn't about you being insufficient, Adrian. It's about me being in love with someone else. It's not fair to you. It never was." "No," he agreed quietly. "It wasn't." They stood in the hallway for a long moment. People walked past on their way to work, coffee cups in hand, oblivious to the quiet devastation happening in a doorway. "The ring's on the kitchen table," Adrian said finally. "You can keep it if you want. Sell it. I don't care." "I don't want it." "Neither do I." He attempted a smile. It didn't land. "Guess we're both pretty good at not wanting things we should." Celine wanted to say something, wanted to apologize again, or explain, or make this hurt less somehow. But there was nothing left to say. She'd broken the heart of the only truly good man she'd ever known, and no words would fix that. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. "You too," Adrian said. "And Celine, whatever you're getting into with him, be careful. He's not like us. He's dangerous." "I know. Do you, though? Really?" She thought about the dossier, the photographs, the list of names crossed out in red. "Yeah, I do." Adrian nodded slowly. Then he stepped back and closed the door. Celine stood in the empty hallway for a minute, crying silently. Then she wiped her face, straightened her shoulders, and walked away. She'd just burned her safe future to ash, and there was no going back. That afternoon, Lucien called her into his office and locked the door behind them. "We need rules," he said without preamble. "What kind of rules?" "The kind that keep you alive." He pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. "First, you don't investigate anything without telling me. Second, you don't meet with anyone connected to this alone. Third, if I tell you to walk away, you walk away. No arguments." Celine crossed her arms. "Those aren't rules. That's you controlling everything." "Yes, because I've been doing this for 20 years and you've been doing it for 12 hours. So teach me." Lucien looked up from the paper. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Teach me how you do this, how you find weaknesses, how you dismantle people without leaving fingerprints, how you've survived this long without getting killed. I want to learn. This isn't an internship, Celine." "No, it's a partnership." She walked to his desk and braced her hands on the surface, leaning forward. "You said I was dangerous. Prove it. Stop treating me like I'm fragile and start treating me like I'm an asset." Lucien stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the cold smile. Not the terrifying one. A real smile. Sharp and predatory and almost proud. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said. "Maybe, but I'll go down fighting. That's what I'm afraid of." He stood up, walked around the desk, and kissed her again. Slower this time. Deliberate. When he pulled back, his expression was serious. "Okay," he said. "Partners. But if you die because of this, I'm bringing you back just to kill you myself." Celine laughed despite herself. "Deal." "Good. Now sit down. We're starting with Victor Kane." For the next 6 hours, Lucien taught her everything. how to read financial statements for hidden transactions, how to cross-reference offshore accounts with shell corporations, how to identify weaknesses in security protocols, how to build a case so airtight that when it detonated, there'd be no survivors. Celine absorbed it all like she'd been waiting her whole life for this. By the time they left the office that night, together, for the first time ever, she understood the truth. She hadn't just fallen in love with Lucien Draven. She'd found the only person in the world who could match her, and together they were about to become unstoppable, or they were going to die trying. Either way, there was no turning back now. The first target fell in September. His name was Gerald Hutchins, former banking executive, current board member of 3 Fortune 500 companies, and one of the 12 men who'd ordered Marcus Thorne's execution 32 years ago. He lived in a penthouse in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows and a wine collection worth more than most people's mortgages. Celine found the weakness in his armor in less than 72 hours. Hutchins had a mistress, 26 years old, art history degree from Yale, working as a curator at a gallery in Soho. He'd been funneling money to her through a series of shell accounts tied to a charitable foundation he controlled. Tax fraud, embezzlement, enough to send him to prison for 15 years if the right people found out. Celine made sure the right people found out. She leaked the documents to the IRS, the SEC, and 3 investigative journalists simultaneously. By the time Hutchins realized what was happening, his accounts were frozen, his board position suspended, and federal agents were walking through his penthouse with warrant papers. He was arrested on a Wednesday morning. Lucien watched the news coverage from his office with something approaching satisfaction. Not joy. He didn't do joy. But there was a tightness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before, a slight easing of the perpetual tension he carried like a second skeleton. "One down," Celine said from the doorway. Lucien glanced at her. 2 to go. She crossed the office and stood beside him at the window. Down below, Manhattan hummed with oblivious life. People rushing to meetings, grabbing coffee, living small, safe existences that would never intersect with the kind of war she and Lucien were waging 52 floors above their heads. "You're good at this," Lucien said quietly. "At destroying people? At finding the truth buried under lies." He turned to look at her. "You did in 3 days what would have taken me 3 weeks. I had a good teacher. You're a natural." There was something almost sad in his voice when he said it, like he'd hoped she wouldn't be. Like he'd wanted her to be too soft for this world he'd dragged her into. But Celine wasn't soft. She'd spent 2 years working for the most ruthless man in America, learning how to read power plays and spot weaknesses and survive in rooms full of predators. She'd just never had permission to use those skills for something other than scheduling meetings. Now she did, and it felt like finally breathing after drowning for years. "What's next?" she asked. Lucien pulled a folder from his desk. Victor Kane. The name hung in the air like a curse. Celine had read the file a dozen times in the past 3 weeks. Kane was the trigger man, the one who'd actually pulled the trigger and killed Marcus Thorne. Russian mob connections, military training, a ghost who'd vanished into Eastern Europe after the hit and resurfaced a decade later running a private security firm in Prague. He was untouchable, protected by layers of legal immunity, diplomatic connections, and enough money to buy his way out of anything. "He's too insulated," Celine said. We can't touch him directly." "No, but we can touch the people protecting him." Lucien opened the folder. Inside were photos of 3 men. Kane's security firm is funded by a consortium of investors. These 3 are the primary backers. If we cut off his money, we cut off his protection. How long will that take? 6 months. Maybe a year. Celine felt frustration coil in her chest. That's too long. It's how long it takes to do this right. Or we could... No. Lucien's voice was hard, final. We don't rush this. Rushing gets people killed. We move carefully, methodically, the same way I've been doing this for 20 years. And how's that worked out? You've taken down 12 people and there are still 3 left. At this rate, you'll be 60 before you finish. Lucien's expression went cold. Would you rather I be dead at 43? I'd rather we finish this before someone finishes us first. That's not how this works. Then maybe it's time to change how it works. They stared at each other across the office. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. This was their first real fight since they'd started working together, and Celine could feel the fault lines already forming. Lucien broke first. He turned away, bracing his hands against the desk. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." "Cain is a killer, Celine. Not a businessman, not a politician, a professional killer with 40 years of experience and no conscience. If we go after him directly, he won't just destroy our finances. He'll put bullets in our heads. So we make sure he can't." "How?" Celine didn't have an answer, not yet, but she was starting to form one. That night, alone in her apartment, she'd moved out of Adrian's place weeks ago, found a studio in Hell's Kitchen with a view of a brick wall and a radiator that actually worked. She pulled out every file Lucien had given her on Cain. There had to be a weakness. Everyone had one. Hutchins had his mistress. The others had their greed. What did Cain have? She read until 3 in the morning, then 4, then 5, and finally she found it. Cain had a daughter. Lucien said no immediately. "Absolutely not. We are not going after his family." They were in his office, 7 in the morning. Celine had come in early specifically to avoid having this conversation in front of anyone else. "I'm not saying we hurt her," Celine said. "I'm saying we use her." "To do what?" "To get to him. His daughter lives in Berlin. She's a pianist, 28 years old, no criminal record. By all accounts, she has no idea what her father really does for a living. Then she's innocent. She's leverage." Lucien's face was stone. "No." "Lucien, I said no, Celine. We don't involve innocent people. That's a line I won't cross." "You've crossed every other line. Not that one." He stood up, radiating barely controlled anger. "My father was innocent. He was trying to expose corruption, and they killed him for it. I've spent my entire adult life making sure the people responsible paid for that. But I will not become them. I will not hurt someone who did nothing wrong." Celine held her ground. "I'm not asking you to hurt her. I'm asking you to use information about her to pressure Cain into making a mistake." "And what happens when he retaliates? When he decides the best way to protect his daughter is to eliminate the threat? Which is us. Then we make sure we're ready for him." "You're not listening to me." "No, you're not listening to me." Celine's voice rose. "You want to spend another year building a case against his investors. Another year while he's out there, free, living his life like he didn't murder your father. I'm offering you a way to end this now. By becoming a monster. By being smart." Lucien crossed the office in 2 strides and stopped inches from her. His eyes were molten steel. "You think I haven't thought about going after her? You think in 20 years it never occurred to me that Cain has people he loves, and hurting them would hurt him? Then why haven't you? Because the moment I do that, I prove everyone right. Every person who calls me a sociopath. Every article that says I'm a threat to civilized society. They'll be right. And I'll have turned into exactly what my father spent his life fighting against." Celine met his gaze without flinching. "Your father's dead, Lucien. He can't judge you for the choices you make to survive." The slap of those words hit harder than any physical blow. Lucien's expression shattered for half a second, raw grief and rage flickering across his face, before he locked it down again. "Get out," he said quietly. "Lucien, get out of my office, now." Celine left. She sat at her desk for the next 6 hours in a haze of anger and guilt. She'd crossed a line. She knew it. Throwing his dead father in his face was cruel and unnecessary, and exactly the kind of thing she'd promised herself she wouldn't do. But she wasn't wrong about Cain. At 3 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. Text from Lucien, conference room 7, 5 minutes. She found him waiting by the window, staring out at the city like it held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. He didn't turn around when she entered. "I'm sorry," Celine said. "What I said about your father was out of line." "Yes, it was." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "But you weren't wrong about Cain." Celine's heart kicked against her ribs. "What are you saying?" Lucien turned around. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged a decade in 6 hours. "I'm saying we do it. We use his daughter, but we do it my way, carefully, with safeguards. And if anything goes wrong, if she gets hurt because of us, we abort immediately." "Agreed." "I mean it, Celine. One scratch on her, and this whole thing ends. I understand. He studied her face for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, pulled her against him, and kissed her forehead. It was gentle, almost reverent, completely at odds with the conversation they'd just had about manipulating an innocent woman to destroy her father. I love you, he said quietly. But sometimes I'm terrified of what you're turning into. Celine closed her eyes. I'm turning into you. I know, that's what terrifies me. Baptiste. They spent the next 3 weeks building the plan. Kane's daughter, Elena Kane, stage name Elena Volkov, was preparing for a series of concerts across Europe. Berlin, Prague, Vienna. She was talented, genuinely talented. Celine watched videos of her playing Rachmaninoff and felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. This woman had done nothing wrong. She was just a pianist trying to make a living doing what she loved. And Celine was about to turn her life into a weapon. But she pushed the guilt down and kept working. The plan was simple. They'd leak information to Kane that his daughter was being investigated for tax fraud related to her concert earnings. Completely fabricated, but believable enough that he'd panic. While he was distracted trying to protect her, they'd move against his security firm. Freeze accounts. Trigger investigations. Dismantle his empire while he was too focused on Elena to notice. It was elegant, efficient, completely ruthless. Lucien hated it, but he agreed anyway. On a cold Tuesday in October, exactly 1 month after Hutchins' arrest, they executed the first phase. Anonymous tips sent to 3 European tax agencies, falsified documents suggesting Elena had been underreporting income for years. Within 48 hours, she was contacted by German authorities. Within 72 hours, Kane knew, and that's when everything went to hell. Bust. The call came at 2 in the morning. Celine was asleep in Lucien's penthouse. She'd been staying there more nights than not lately, drawn to the strange safety of sleeping next to someone who understood exactly how dangerous the world really was, when her phone screamed to life. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Static. Then a voice. Male. Accented. Cold as winter in Siberia. Celine Vale. Every nerve in her body fired at once. She sat up so fast her vision blurred. Beside her, Lucien stirred awake, instantly alert. Who is this? She demanded. You know who this is? The voice was calm, almost pleasant, like they were discussing the weather instead of something that made Celine's blood run cold. You made a mistake, Miss Vale. A very serious mistake. Lucien grabbed the phone from her hand and put it on speaker. His face was white. Kane, he said. Lucien Draven, or should I call you Elijah Thorne? The voice on the other end laughed softly. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? After all these years, I've been watching you for a long time. Watching you dismantle my friends one by one. Watching you build your little empire on the bones of the people I was paid to protect. If you hurt my daughter, Lucien started. Your daughter? Kane's voice turned sharp. You mean Elena? No. I think you're confused. You went after my daughter, so now I'm going to go after yours. Celine's blood turned to ice. I don't have a daughter, Lucien said. Not yet, but you will. In about 7 months, I'd estimate. The world stopped. Celine's hand went to her stomach automatically, reflexively. She couldn't be. They'd been careful. But even as her brain tried to reject it, her body knew the truth. The exhaustion she'd been ignoring for weeks, the nausea she'd blamed on stress, the tenderness in her breast that she'd written off as nothing. Oh, God. You're lying, Lucien said, but his voice was shaking. Am I? Ask her yourself. Better yet, have her take a test. I'll wait. Kane sounded amused now, entertained. I have to say, I'm impressed. I didn't think you had it in you, Draven. Love, family, all those soft human things you pretend not to need. But here we are. How did you know? Celine whispered. I know everything, Miss Vale. I know you stopped drinking coffee 3 weeks ago. I know you've been nauseous every morning. I know you scheduled a doctor's appointment for next Tuesday but canceled it because you were afraid of the answer. I know because I've had people watching you for months. Lucien's hand was crushing Celine's now. She could feel his pulse hammering against her wrist. What do you want? Lucien asked. What do I want? Kane repeated thoughtfully. I want you to understand something. For 30 years, you've been hunting the people who killed your father. You've destroyed their lives, ruined their families, sent them to prison or to their graves. And I've watched, waited, because I knew eventually you'd make a mistake. And you did. You fell in love. I'll kill you, Lucian said quietly. I will find you and I will kill you myself. No, you won't. Because if anything happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, my people have instructions to kill her. A pause. And the baby. Can't forget the baby. Celine couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning. Here's what's going to happen, Kane continued. You're going to leave Elena alone. You're going to drop whatever fabricated investigation you started. And you're going to stop hunting the people who killed your father. All of it ends. Now. Tonight. Or I start taking things from you the way you've been taking things from me. And if I agree, then I let you live. I let her live. I let your child live. You get to play house and pretend you're a normal person with a normal life. Isn't that what you wanted, anyway? Lucien's face was carved from stone. You expect me to believe you'll just walk away? I expect you to not have a choice. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, you have 24 hours to decide. Stop the investigation into Elena, or I start killing the people you love. Starting with Celine. The call ended. Lucian hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall with a sound like a gunshot. Then he stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking, looking like he was about to explode. Celine couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her hand was still on her stomach, and suddenly the last 3 weeks made terrible, perfect sense. I need you to say something, Lucian said without looking at her. His voice was barely above a whisper. Anything. I think I'm pregnant. The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. Lucian turned slowly. His face was white, bloodless. Are you sure? No, maybe. I don't know. Celine stood up on shaking legs. I haven't taken a test. I didn't want to know. Why not? Because if I knew, it would be real. And if it was real, it would change everything. Lucien crossed the room and pulled her against him so hard it hurt. His hands were in her hair, her back, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. This is my fault, he said into her shoulder. All of it. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. How could you have seen this coming? Because this is what they do. They find the thing you love most and they use it to destroy you. He pulled back just far enough to look at her. His eyes were wet. She'd never seen him cry. I'm so sorry, Celine. I'm so goddamn sorry. Stop apologizing and tell me what we do now. I don't know. Yes, you do. You've been planning for this exact scenario for 20 years. No, I haven't. Because I never thought I'd have something to lose. His hands were framing her face now, trembling against her skin. If it was just me, I'd tell Kane to go to hell and deal with the consequences. But it's not just me anymore, it's you, and his gaze dropped to her stomach. Maybe a baby. Celine felt tears burning behind her eyes. So we give up? We let him win. We survive. That's all that matters now. Lucien, I can't lose you. The words ripped out of him like something bleeding. I can't. I survived losing my father because I had nothing left to lose. But if I lose you, if I lose this... He broke off, unable to finish. Celine grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. Then we don't lose. We fight. Against Victor Kane? He's a professional killer, Celine. He's survived 30 years in one of the most dangerous professions on Earth. We're not equipped to fight him. Then we get equipped. How? She didn't have an answer, not immediately, but her mind was already racing, cataloging options, calculating risks, looking for the weakness in Kane's armor the same way she'd found weaknesses in everyone else. There had to be something. Everyone had a vulnerability, even professional killers. We need to know if I'm actually pregnant first, she said finally. Kane could be bluffing. He's not. You don't know that. I know him. He doesn't bluff. Lucien released her and walked to the window. Manhattan spread out below them, oblivious to the war being waged in a penthouse 50 stories above the street. He's been watching us for months. He knows things about you that I don't know. That means he has people close to us, inside our circle. The implications of that hit Celine like a freight train. Someone's been spying on us. Yes. Who? I don't know. But we need to find out. He turned back to her. Tomorrow morning, you're taking a pregnancy test. Then we're sweeping this entire building for surveillance devices. Then we're going through every person who has access to us. Assistants, security, cleaning crews, everyone. And we're going to find out who sold us to Kane. And then what? Then we make them wish they'd never been born. The coldness in his voice sent a shiver down Celine's spine. This was the Lucien she'd heard about but never fully seen. The monster. The weapon. The man who'd destroyed 12 people without losing a night of sleep. And for the first time since she'd met him, Celine was genuinely afraid. Not of him. Of what they were both becoming. The pregnancy test was positive. Celine stared at the little plastic stick in the bathroom of Lucien's penthouse at 6 in the morning, watching 2 pink lines appear like a verdict she couldn't appeal. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With Lucien's child. In the middle of a war with a man who just threatened to kill them both. She walked out of the bathroom on numb legs and found Lucien standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. He was talking to someone in rapid-fire Russian. His voice was hard, controlled, lethal. When he saw her face, he ended the call immediately. Positive? He asked. Celine nodded. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Lucien crossed the room, dropped to his knees in front of her, and pressed his forehead against her stomach. I'm going to protect you, he whispered. Both of you. Whatever it takes. Celine's hands found his hair. We're going to protect each other. No, this is my fight, my past. You shouldn't have to... Stop! She pulled his head back, forcing him to look up at her. We're in this together. We have been since the moment I walked into your office and told you I loved you. So stop trying to protect me from your war and let me fight beside you. Lucien stood up slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. But there was something else there now, too. Something that looked almost like hope. Okay, he said. Partners. Partners. He kissed her, soft and desperate and terrified. Then he stepped back and his expression hardened into something brutal. Kane wanted 24 hours. He's getting 6. We're ending this today. How? We're going to do what I should have done 30 years ago. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Get the car ready. We're going to the police. Celine's stomach dropped. Lucien, you can't. Half the things you've done are illegal. If you go to the police, then I go to prison. But you'll be safe. The baby will be safe. That's all that matters. No. Celine grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There isn't. Then we find one. Together. She was gripping his arm so hard her knuckles were white. You didn't spend 20 years building this empire just to throw it away. We're smarter than this. We're better than this. Are we? Yes. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he canceled the call. Okay, he said quietly. Then we do it your way. We fight. Together. Together. And somewhere in Prague, Victor Kane smiled as he listened to the recording of their conversation through the bug he'd had planted in Lucien's penthouse 3 months ago. Everything was going exactly according to plan. The bug was in the bedroom. They found it at 7 in the morning, hidden inside the base of a lamp Lucien had owned for 6 years. A tiny piece of hardware, no bigger than a shirt button, transmitting everything they'd said in that room for the past 3 months directly to Victor Kane. Every conversation, every argument, every intimate moment, all of it recorded, cataloged, weaponized. Celine stood in the bedroom doorway, watching the security specialist carefully extract the device with tweezers, and she felt something cold and vicious crystallize in her chest. This wasn't just surveillance. This was violation. Kane had been inside their lives, listening to them breathe, cataloging their weaknesses like a scientist studying lab rats. How many more? Lucien asked. His voice was flat, empty. The kind of emptiness that preceded explosions. The security specialist, a woman named Torres with military posture and a scar bisecting her left eyebrow, checked her scanner. 3 more. 1 in your office downstairs, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the living room. Not the bathroom? No, looks like he wanted audio, not video. Probably worried about legal exposure if he recorded you in compromising positions. How considerate, Celine said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. It sounded like broken glass scraping concrete. Torres pulled out the bug and dropped it into a lead-lined case. These are top of the line, military grade. Whoever planted them knew what they were doing. When? Lucian demanded. When were they installed? Torres checked the device serial number against a database on her tablet. Based on the model, I'd say 3 to 4 months ago. You have anyone do work in here during that time frame? Lucien and Celine looked at each other. 3 months ago, Lucien had hired a new cleaning service, recommended by his building manager, vetted, background checked, completely legitimate. Or so they'd thought. I need a name, Lucien said. Torres nodded. I'll have it in an hour. You have 30 minutes. 27 minutes later, Torres called back with a name. Maria Volkov. Age 42, originally from Moscow. She'd been working for the cleaning service for 6 months, assigned to Lucian's penthouse for the last 4, Volkov. The same last name Elena Kane used as her stage name. It wasn't a coincidence. She's family, Celine said, staring at the photo Torres had sent. Maria looked ordinary, forgettable. The kind of middle-aged woman you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Kane planted someone from his own family inside your home. Lucien was pacing now, back and forth across the living room like a caged animal. Where is she now? Torres's voice came through the speakerphone. According to her work schedule, she's supposed to clean an apartment in the financial district this morning, but she didn't show up. Her phone's off, credit card's inactive, she's gone. Find her. Mr. Draven, if she's working for Kane, she's probably already out of the country. Then find out where she went and who helped her leave. Lucian's voice was ice. I want every flight manifest, every border crossing, every goddamn bus ticket out of New York in the last 24 hours. I want to know where she is, who she's with, and what she had for breakfast yesterday. That's going to take I don't care what it takes. Do it. He ended the call and hurled his phone across the room. It hit the wall and exploded into pieces. Celine had never seen him lose control like this. Not once in 2 years. Lucien Draven was a man built on discipline and calculated precision. But right now he looked feral, dangerous, like something inside him had finally snapped. We need to think, Celine said carefully. Losing your temper isn't going to help. He was in my home. Lucian's voice was shaking. In my bedroom, listening to us while we slept, He broke off, unable to finish. I know. No, you don't. You don't understand what this means. Then tell me. Lucien stopped pacing and looked at her. His eyes were wild, haunted. It means he's been 3 steps ahead of us this entire time. It means every plan we made, every strategy we discussed, every weakness we identified, he heard all of it. We weren't hunting him. He was studying us. The implications crashed over Celine like a wave. The plan with Elena. He knew we were coming. Of course he knew. He probably planted the idea in our heads somehow. Got us to target his daughter, knowing it would force his hand. Knowing we'd make a mistake. So what do? Lucien walked to the window and pressed his forehead against the glass. Manhattan stretched out below them, indifferent to their crisis. We assume everything is compromised. Every account, every asset, every safe house. He's been listening for 3 months. He knows where our money is, where we'd run if we had to, who we trust. Celine's hand went to her stomach automatically. The baby. 3 months along if her calculations were right. Still barely real, still just a cluster of cells smaller than a grape, but already a target. We can't stay here, she said. No, but we can't run either. The moment we disappear, he'll know we're scared, and scared people make mistakes. So we what? Act like nothing's changed? We go on the offensive. Lucien turned around. There was something new in his expression now, something that made Celine's pulse spike. He thinks he's won. Thinks he's backed us into a corner. We let him keep thinking that. How? We give him exactly what he wants. Kaz. The next 12 hours were a controlled demolition of everything they'd built. Lucien called off the investigation into Elena Kane, issued a public statement through his lawyers apologizing for the misunderstanding that had led to her being questioned by German authorities, made a donation to her favorite charity, a music education program for underprivileged children large enough to make international news. To the outside world, it looked like capitulation. Lucien Draven, the most ruthless man in American finance, backing down from a fight. The business press had a field day with it. Headlines screamed about his decline. Opinion pieces speculated that he'd lost his edge. Stock prices for Blackthorn Global dipped 3%. Lucien watched it all happen with the detached calm of a surgeon performing an amputation. "He'll contact you soon," he told Celine. "Kane, he'll want confirmation that I'm really giving up." "And when he does? You tell him the truth. I'm done fighting. I want out. I want to raise my child in peace." Celine studied his face. "You're lying to me right now." "No." "Lucien, I'm not lying. I do want those things. I want to marry you. I want to raise our child. I want to wake up every morning without wondering if today's the day someone puts a bullet in my head." He paused. "But I can't have any of that while Kane's alive. So yes, I want out. But first I want him dead." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. "You're going to kill him," Celine said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I will." He crossed the room and took her hands. "This is the part where you tell me I'm crazy, where you say there has to be another way." Celine looked at their joined hands, at the ring he'd given her 2 weeks ago. Simple platinum band, no diamond, just a promise etched into metal. "I'm not going to tell you that." "Why not?" "Because you're right. As long as he's alive, we're not safe. Our baby's not safe. So if you need to kill him to protect us, then you kill him." Lucien's expression cracked for half a second. Then he pulled her against him and held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I need you to know that. Whatever happens next, whatever I have to do, I love you." "I know, and I'm sorry for all of this, for dragging you into my war." "Stop apologizing." Celine pulled back just far enough to look at him. "I chose this. I chose you. And I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over." They kissed like it was the last time, desperate and tender and terrified. Then Lucien's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. "Kane." "Lucien?" The voice was smooth, almost friendly. "I saw the news. Very impressive performance. The donation to Elena's charity was a nice touch. Almost made me believe you." "I meant every word." "Did you? Or are you just buying time to plan my murder?" "If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." Kane laughed. "No, you wouldn't. Because you're not a killer, Draven. You're a businessman. You destroy people with paperwork and legal maneuvers. But when it comes to actual violence, you outsource. And everyone you could have outsourced to, I already own them." "Then I guess you win." "I guess I do." A pause. "Put Celine on." Lucien handed her the phone. His jaw was tight, hands clenched at his sides. "I'm here," Celine said. "How are you feeling? Morning sickness getting better?" The casual intimacy of the question made her skin crawl. "What do you want?" "I want to make sure we understand each other. Lucien's made his choice. He's walking away. Which means you need to walk away too. No more investigations. No more clever financial maneuvers. You go back to being his assistant and eventually his wife, and you raise your child far away from the business that got his father killed. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Convince me. I'm pregnant. I'm not interested in getting killed over a vendetta that started before I was born. Lucien wants out. I support that decision. End of story." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're lying." Celine's heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm not." "Yes, you are. I can hear it in your voice. You're too smart, Miss Vale. Too ambitious. You've spent the last 4 months learning how to be dangerous, and now you think you can beat me at my own game." Kane's voice dropped. "But you can't, because I've been doing this since before you were born. So let me be very clear. If you or Lucien make one move against me, I will kill you both, slowly, and I'll make sure the baby dies first so you can watch." The line went dead. Celine stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her hands were shaking, her breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. She felt Lucien's arms around her, pulling her close, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. Because Kane was right. They couldn't beat him. Not like this. Not while he had the high ground, the resources, and 30 years of experience staying alive in a profession that killed most people within 5. We need a new plan, she said. Lucien nodded against her shoulder. I know. Something he won't see coming. There's nothing he won't see coming. He's heard everything. Not everything. Celine pulled back. Her mind was racing now, cataloging options, calculating risks. He heard what we said in your penthouse, but he doesn't know what we're thinking. He doesn't know what we'd be willing to sacrifice. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give him something he can't resist. Bait so good he has to take it, even if he suspects it's a trap. Like what? Celine's hand went to her stomach. Me. Lucien's face went white. Absolutely not. Listen to me. No. Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no. Lucien, he wants you isolated, powerless. The best way to do that is to take away the thing you love most, which is me. So we make it easy for him. We dangle me as bait, and when he reaches for it, we close the trap. And if the trap fails, if he kills you, then you make sure he doesn't live long enough to enjoy it. Celine, we're out of options. Her voice cracked. He's inside our heads, inside our home. He knows every move we're going to make before we make it. The only advantage we have is that he thinks we're scared. So we use that. We let him think he's won, and then we hit him when his guard is down. Lucien was shaking his head. I can't risk you, either of you. You're not risking us. I'm volunteering. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? You tell me, Lucien, because from where I'm standing, we either fight or we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for him to decide we're not useful anymore. There has to be another way. There isn't, and you know it. They stared at each other across the wreckage of Lucien's living room. Broken phone pieces scattered across the floor, bugs in a lead-lined case, the ghost of Cain's voice still hanging in the air like poison. Finally, Lucien spoke. If we do this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we do, I need guarantees, safeguards, people I trust watching you every second. Agreed. And at the first sign something's wrong, we abort. No heroics, no last-minute saves. We abort and run. Okay? I mean it, Celine. I can live with Cain winning. I can't live without you. She crossed the room and took his face in both hands. Then let's make sure he doesn't win. Whooshed. They spent the next 3 days building the trap. Lucien reached out to contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. People who owed him favors. People who hated Cain as much as he did. People who understood that this was a war, and in war you didn't ask questions about methodology. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Celine would leak information to Cain's network that she was leaving Lucien, breaking off the engagement. Scared for her safety and the babies, she'd arrange a meeting with a lawyer to discuss her options, custody arrangements, financial settlements, protection orders. Cain would intercept her, either to kill her or to use her as leverage against Lucien. Either way, he'd have to come out of hiding, and when he did, Lucien would be waiting. The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon, 3 days away. A lawyer's office in Midtown, public enough to seem safe, private enough to be vulnerable. Perfect bait. On Wednesday night, Celine couldn't sleep. She lay awake in Lucien's bed, the bed where Cain had listened to them for months, and stared at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her stomach, still flat, still unremarkable. But inside, cells were dividing, a heart was forming. Something that would eventually become a person was growing inside her while she planned to use herself as bait for a professional killer. What kind of mother did that? You're thinking too loud, Lucien said beside her. He wasn't sleeping either. Sorry. Don't be. I'm thinking too loud too. Celine turned her head to look at him. In the darkness, she could just make out his profile. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes open and staring at nothing. Are we crazy? Probably. Normal people don't do things like this. We stopped being normal people a long time ago. When? When did it happen? Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then, for me? The night my father died. I watched him bleed out on our driveway, and I understood that the world wasn't safe. That bad things happened to good people, and no one was coming to save you. So I decided to become the kind of person who didn't need saving. And me? You? He turned to look at her. I think you were always like this. Relentless. Unbreakable. You just needed permission to stop pretending otherwise. Celine thought about that. About the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Ambitious but cautious. Smart but careful. Always playing by rules she didn't fully understand. That woman was gone now. Burned away by months of working beside Lucian, learning how to read power structures and spot weaknesses and destroy people without leaving fingerprints. She'd become exactly what he'd said she was. Dangerous. "I love you," she said. "I know." "Do you? Because sometimes I think you're still waiting for me to realize what a mistake this is and walk away." Lucian pulled her closer. His hand found hers on her stomach. Their fingers intertwined. "I stopped waiting for that the night you came back to my office after leaving Adrian. You could have chosen safe. You chose me instead. That's not a mistake. That's a goddamn miracle. Even if it gets us both killed?" Even then. They lay there in the darkness, holding each other, listening to the city breathe outside the windows. Tomorrow, Celine would start leaking information to Kane's network. Tomorrow, they'd set the trap in motion. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, they were just two people in love, lying in bed, pretending the world outside didn't want them dead. "Lucien?" "Yeah?" "If this goes wrong, if something happens to me, don't. I need to say it. If something happens, you take care of our baby. You raise them to be smart and careful and nothing like us. You give them a normal life. Promise me." Lucian's arms tightened around her. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway." For a long time, he didn't answer. Then so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "I promise." Celine closed her eyes. "Thank you." They didn't sleep that night, just held each other until dawn bled across the Manhattan skyline, and it was time to start the most dangerous game either of them had ever played. The leak went out Thursday morning. Celine called a friend, former colleague from her previous job, someone she'd kept in touch with, someone who had connections to gossip columns and society pages, and told her, in confidence, that she was leaving Lucien. The story hit the tabloids by noon. Blackthorn. Breakdown. Sources say Celine Vale. Fleeing relationship with billionaire strategist. It was perfect. Salacious enough to spread quickly. Vague enough to invite speculation. And exactly the kind of thing Kane would be monitoring. By 2 in the afternoon, Celine's phone was flooded with messages, friends checking in, former co-workers offering support, journalists fishing for quotes. She ignored them all. At 3:30, she left Blackthorn Tower through the side entrance. No bodyguards, no security detail. Just her, a purse, and a taxi heading to a lawyer's office in Midtown. Lucian watched her go from his office window. His hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He'd wanted to call it off a dozen times that morning. Wanted to lock her in the penthouse and find another way to end this. But there was no other way. So he watched her disappear into New York traffic and prayed to a God he didn't believe in that he'd see her again. The lawyer's office was on the 32nd floor of a glass tower near Bryant Park. Celine signed in at the security desk, took the elevator up, and walked down a carpeted hallway that smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. The receptionist smiled at her. "Miss Vale, Mr. Morrison is running a few minutes behind. Can I get you some water?" "No, thank you." Celine sat in the waiting area and checked her watch. 3:45. The meeting was supposed to start at 4. Lucien had people positioned in the building, security contractors, all of them armed, all of them ready to move the second something went wrong. But nothing felt wrong. That was the problem. Everything felt too normal, too quiet, like the calm before a hurricane. At 3:58, the receptionist's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then hung up and smiled apologetically at Celine. "I'm so sorry, Miss Vale. Mr. Morrison's previous appointment is running long. It'll be another 10 minutes. "That's fine." Celine settled back in her chair and pulled out her phone. No messages from Lucian, no alerts from his security team. Nothing. 10 minutes became 15, then 20. At 4:20, Celine stood up. "I need to use the restroom." "Down the hall, second door on the left." She walked down the hallway, her heels clicking against polished marble. The building was too quiet. Where was everyone? She'd passed maybe 3 people since arriving. For a Thursday afternoon in Midtown Manhattan, that was strange. The bathroom was empty. Celine locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone to text Lucian. The message wouldn't send. No signal. Her pulse spiked. She tried again. Nothing. She left the stall and checked the main area. Still no signal. Someone was jamming communications. Celine's hand went to her purse. Inside was a panic button Lucian had given her. One press would alert his security team. She reached for it. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. An alarm started blaring somewhere in the building. Automated voice. Attention! There has been a fire alarm activation on this floor. Please proceed calmly to the nearest exit. Celine ran for the door. It was locked. She pulled harder. Nothing. The electronic lock had engaged when the alarm triggered. Fire protocol. Or a trap. She spun around looking for another exit. The window was sealed. No way out. She was trapped in a bathroom on the 32nd floor with no phone signal and no way to call for help. The panic button. She pressed it 3 times in rapid succession. Then she waited. 30 seconds, 60, 90. No one came. The alarm kept blaring. The red lights kept flashing. And Celine stood alone in that bathroom, pregnant and terrified, realizing too late that Kane had been 10 steps ahead of them from the very beginning. The door handle rattled. Someone was on the other side. Celine backed away until she hit the wall. Her heart was trying to punch through her rib cage. She had no weapon, no way out, nothing but her wits and the thin hope that Lucien would figure out what was happening before it was too late. The door opened. A woman stepped through, mid-40s, unremarkable features, wearing a cleaning service uniform. Maria Volkov. "Hello, Miss Vale," she said in accented English. "Mr. Kane would like to see you now." Celine's world narrowed to a single point of absolute clarity. She was going to die here, unless she fought. So she fought. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal soap dispenser, and hurled it at Maria's head. It hit her temple with a wet crack. Maria stumbled backward, blood streaming down her face. Celine ran. She made it 3 steps before someone grabbed her from behind, strong arms, male, smelling like cigarettes and gun oil. She screamed and thrashed, but he was too strong. He lifted her off her feet like she weighed nothing and carried her back into the bathroom. Maria was on her feet now, one hand pressed to her bleeding head, the other holding a syringe. "Hold her still," she said. The man holding Celine tightened his grip. She felt the needle bite into her neck, cold liquid flooding her veins. "No," she gasped. "Please, I'm pregnant. Don't." The world tilted sideways. The last thing Celine saw before the darkness took her was Maria's face, expressionless and cold, watching her lose consciousness like it meant nothing at all. Then everything went black. Lucien knew something was wrong at 4:23. The panic button activated. 3 rapid pulses. Then silence. He was moving before he consciously made the decision. Out of his office, into the elevator, dialing his security team with shaking hands. "She pressed the button," he said the moment someone answered. "Get to that building now." "We're already moving, sir. ETA, 3 minutes." 3 minutes. Celine could be dead in 3 minutes. The elevator wasn't fast enough. Lucien hit the emergency stop button and took the stairs instead. 52 flights. He ran them all, his lungs burning, his legs screaming, his mind cycling through every possible scenario, and none of them ended well. He burst out of the stairwell into the lobby and sprinted for his car. His driver was already waiting, engine running. "Go," Lucien gasped. They hit traffic immediately. Manhattan gridlock, cars everywhere, no way through. Lucien abandoned the car and ran. 12 blocks. He covered them in under 8 minutes. By the time he reached the building where Celine was supposed to be, his security team was already there, and they were standing in front of an empty office. "Where is she?" Lucien demanded. The team leader, a former Marine named Carson, looked grim. "Sir, there was no lawyer. The whole thing was a setup. Morrison doesn't exist. The office was rented 2 days ago by a shell corporation." "Where is she?" "We don't know. The building's security footage was wiped. No one saw anything. She just vanished." Lucien felt the world drop out from under him. Kane had her, and there was nothing he could do about it. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello, Lucien," Kane said. "Let's talk about terms of surrender." Lucien Draven had built empires on control. He'd spent 20 years mastering every variable, predicting every outcome, never allowing emotion to compromise strategy. But standing in that empty office with his phone pressed to his ear and Victor Kane's voice crawling through the speaker, he felt control slip through his fingers like water. "Where is she?" His voice was raw, stripped of everything except fear. "Safe," Kane said. "For now. She's sleeping off a mild sedative. When she wakes up, she'll be confused, scared, but unharmed. I'm not a monster, Lucian. I don't hurt pregnant women. If you touch her..." "You'll what? Kill me? You've been trying to do that for 2 decades, and you're no closer now than you were when you were 17 and watching your father bleed out." Kane's voice was almost gentle, pitying. "You're a businessman, not a soldier. You don't have what it takes to win this kind of war." Lucien's free hand was clenched so tight his nails were cutting into his palm, blood welled between his fingers. "Tell me what you want." "What I've always wanted, for you to stop. To walk away from this vendetta and let the past stay buried. And if I do, you'll let her go. Eventually, after I am certain you've learned your lesson." A pause. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer control of Blackthorn Global to a neutral third party. You're going to liquidate all your assets and donate the proceeds to charity. You're going to publicly announce your retirement and disappear from the business world entirely. And then, if you've been a good boy, I'll tell you where to find Celine. How do I know you won't kill her anyway?" "You don't. That's the beauty of surrender, Lucien. You have to trust that the man holding the knife will show mercy." Kane laughed softly. "You have 48 hours. After that, Celine starts losing fingers. 1 per day until you comply." The line went dead. Lucien stood frozen in that empty office, surrounded by his security team, staring at his phone like it was a loaded gun that had just misfired. His mind was racing through scenarios, calculating odds, searching for the angle that would save Celine and destroy Kane simultaneously. There wasn't one. Every path led to the same conclusion: complete surrender or Celine's death. Carson stepped forward carefully. "Sir, we can trace the call, track his location. He's using burner phones. By the time you triangulate the signal, he'll be 3 cities away." Lucien's voice sounded hollow, empty. "He's been doing this for 30 years. He knows every trick." "Then what do we do?" Lucien looked around the office, at the fake lawyer's nameplate, at the carefully constructed trap that he'd walked Celine directly into, at the evidence of his own catastrophic failure spread out around him like shrapnel. "We give him what he wants," he said quietly. "Sir, start the process. Transfer paperwork for Blackthorn Global. Liquidation plans. All of it. I want everything ready to execute within 48 hours. Carson's face was grim. "You're actually going to surrender." "I'm going to get Celine back, whatever that takes." But even as he said it, Lucien knew it was a lie. Because surrendering to Kane meant trusting a killer to keep his word. And killers didn't keep their word. They took what they wanted and eliminated loose ends. Celine was a loose end. So was their baby. So was he. The moment Lucien signed over everything he'd built, Kane would kill them all. Unless Lucien found another way. Celine woke up in darkness. Her head felt like it was full of broken glass. Her mouth tasted like copper and chemicals. She tried to move and realized her hands were zip-tied to a metal chair. Her ankles, too. The chair was bolted to the floor. Panic clawed up her throat. She forced it down, forced herself to breathe, to think. She was alive. That meant Kane wanted her alive, which meant she had value, which meant she had leverage. The room around her was small, concrete walls, no windows. A single door made of reinforced steel. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear traffic. They were still in the city, maybe. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. "Is anyone there?" Silence. She tried the zip ties. They were industrial strength, cutting into her wrists when she pulled. She forced herself to stop. Conserve energy. Stay calm. Think like Lucien. What would he do? He'd assess the situation, identify weaknesses, find the angle no one else saw. Celine closed her eyes and ran through everything she knew about Victor Kane, professional killer, Russian mob connections, 30 years of experience, a daughter he cared about enough to threaten people over. A daughter. That was the weakness. Everyone said Kane was untouchable. But he'd shown his hand when he reacted to the investigation into Elena. He'd revealed that he was capable of emotion, capable of fear, capable of making mistakes when someone he loved was threatened. just like Lucian, just like her. The door opened. Light flooded in, blinding after the darkness. Celine squinted against it. A silhouette stood in the doorway. Male, tall, moving with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent decades learning how to kill efficiently. Victor Kane stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He was older than his photos suggested, mid-60s at least. Gray hair cropped military short, face like weathered leather, eyes that assessed her the way a surgeon assesses a tumor, clinically, without emotion, already planning the incision. "Miss Vale," he said. His accent was slight, polished. "I apologize for the accommodations. This was arranged on short notice." "Where am I?" "Somewhere Lucian will never find you." He pulled over a second chair and sat down facing her. "How are you feeling? The sedative we used is safe for pregnant women, but I imagine you're experiencing some nausea." Celine's hand instinctively tried to go to her stomach. The zip ties stopped her. "If you hurt my baby, I won't. I have a daughter myself. I understand the protective instinct." He leaned back, studying her. "You're wondering if you can manipulate me. Use my love for Elena against me the way you tried before." Celine said nothing. "It won't work," Kane continued. "I've spent 30 years anticipating every possible move my enemies could make. I've survived assassination attempts, federal investigations, betrayals from my own people. You're smart, Miss Vale. Impressively so, but you're not smarter than me. Then why keep me alive? If I'm not a threat, why not just kill me now? Because you're leverage. As long as I have you, Lucien will do exactly what I tell him to do. And once he's no longer useful," Kane shrugged. "We'll see. He won't surrender. You know that. He already is. My sources tell me he's started the process of transferring Blackthorn Global, liquidating assets, preparing to give me everything I asked for." Celine felt something cold settle in her chest. Lucien was actually doing it, giving up everything he'd built to save her. "He's lying," she said. "He's planning something." "Of course he is. Lucien always has a plan. But here's the thing about plans. They require information, and right now he has none. He doesn't know where you are, doesn't know who's holding you, doesn't know if you're even still alive. All he knows is that if he doesn't do exactly what I say, you'll die." Kane leaned forward. "So yes, he's planning something, but it won't matter, because I'm always 3 moves ahead." "You're wrong about him." "Am I?" "He's not just a businessman. He's a weapon. You created him when you killed his father, and now he's coming for you." Kane smiled. "Let him come. I've been waiting 20 years for this. The son hunting the father's killer. It's almost poetic. Except Lucien isn't a killer. He doesn't have it in him, and that's why he'll lose. You don't know him like I do. And you don't know me at all." Kane stood up. "Get comfortable, Miss Vale. You're going to be here for a while." He walked to the door, then paused. "One more thing. If Lucien tries anything at all, I'll send you back to him piece by piece, starting with the parts that matter least. Do you understand?" Celine met his eyes. "Perfectly." Kane nodded and left. The door locked behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. Celine sat alone in the darkness and forced herself to think. Forced herself past the fear and the nausea and the terrible knowledge that she was completely, utterly powerless. Lucien would come for her. She knew that with absolute certainty. The question was whether he'd get here before Kane killed them both, and whether there was anything she could do to help him. Falsa. Lucien didn't sleep for the next 36 hours. He mobilized every resource he had, called in favors from people he'd helped over the years, reached out to contacts in law enforcement, intelligence agencies, private security firms, offered money, offered leverage, offered anything that might lead him to Celine. Nothing worked. Kane had vanished. So had Maria Volkov. So had every trace of where they might have taken Celine. It was like she'd been swallowed by the earth. By hour 40, Lucien was standing in his office staring at the paperwork that would end his empire. Transfer documents, liquidation orders, a public statement announcing his retirement, everything Kane had demanded. All it needed was his signature. Carson stood nearby, arms crossed. "Sir, if you sign those papers, you'll have nothing left to fight with. I don't care about fighting. I care about getting her back. And you think Kane will just hand her over? The moment you sign, you're worthless to him. He'll kill you both." I know. Then why? Because I don't have another option. Lucian's control finally shattered. He swept everything off his desk, papers, laptop, coffee cup, sending it all crashing to the floor. I've tried everything, every contact, every angle, every goddamn trick I know, and I'm no closer to finding her than I was 36 hours ago. So yes, I'm going to sign the papers. And yes, Kane will probably kill us anyway, but at least I'll die knowing I tried everything. Carson was quiet for a long moment. Then, there might be one more option. What? Elena Kane. Lucian went very still. No. Hear me out. We couldn't use her before because Kane was listening to everything we said. But now we have nothing to lose. We grab her, use her as leverage to get Celine back. We are not kidnapping an innocent woman. She's not innocent. She's his daughter. That makes her fair game. It makes her a civilian caught in the middle of someone else's war. Lucian's voice was ice. I won't do it. Find another way. There is no other way. Then I'll make one. But even as Lucian said it, he knew Carson was right. Elena was the only card they had left to play, the only thing Kane cared about more than revenge. And if Lucien was willing to sacrifice everything he'd built to save Celine, why wasn't he willing to sacrifice his principles? The answer was simple, because the moment he crossed that line, he became exactly what Kane was, a monster who hurt innocent people to achieve his goals. And if he became that, then Kane had already won. Lucian's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Kane, 12 hours left, Lucian. Have you made your decision? I want proof of life. Let me talk to Celine. No. Then I don't sign anything. Silence on the other end. Then, hold on, rustling. Footsteps. A door opening. Then Celine's voice, rough and terrified, and the most beautiful sound Lucien had ever heard. Lucien? Are you hurt? No, I'm okay. The baby's okay. Relief crashed through him so hard he had to grab the desk to stay upright. I'm going to get you out of there. I promise. Don't give him what he wants. He's going to kill us anyway. Celine, I mean it. Don't surrender. Find another way. You always find another way. There is no other way. Then make one. Her voice was fierce, unbreakable. You didn't spend 20 years building this just to throw it away. Fight him, Lucien. Fight him the way you fought everyone else. No mercy. No hesitation. Just... The phone was yanked away. Kane's voice returned. Touching. But ultimately pointless. You have 12 hours, Lucien. After that, Celine starts learning what real pain feels like. Wait. The line went dead. Lucien stood in his destroyed office, holding a phone that had just delivered both salvation and damnation. Celine was alive, but she was counting on him to save her without giving Kane what he wanted, which was impossible. Unless... An idea crystallized in his mind. Terrible. Ruthless. Exactly the kind of thing his father would have condemned. But his father was dead, and Celine was still alive. That was all that mattered. Lucien looked at Carson. Get Elena Kane. I don't care how. Just get her. Carson's expression didn't change. Yes, sir. And Carson? Don't hurt her. Scare her if you have to, but don't hurt her. Understood. Carson left. Lucien sat down at his desk and started making calls. Not to lawyers or security firms or law enforcement. To people who operated in shadows. People who understood that sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to become one yourself. By the time he was done, he'd assembled a team of 6. Former military, former intelligence, men and women who'd done things in dark corners of the world that they'd never speak about and didn't regret. They met in a warehouse in Brooklyn 4 hours later. Lucien stood before them and laid out the plan. It was brutal, probably illegal, almost certainly going to end with people dead. Nobody objected. We move in 8 hours, Lucien said. Questions? A woman named Torres, the same security specialist who'd found the bugs in his penthouse, raised her hand. What happens if we can't find Kane's location in time? We make him come to us. How? Lucien pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. Elena Kane, smiling, unaware that her life was about to become a bargaining chip. We take his daughter, Lucien said, and we trade her for mine, Protect. Elena Kane was in her apartment in Berlin when they came for her. It was 2 in the morning. She'd just finished practicing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece she'd be performing at the Philharmonie next week, and was pouring herself a glass of wine when someone knocked on her door. She looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-30s, professional clothes, holding a clipboard. "Yes?" Elena called through the door. "Building management. We've had reports of a water leak from your unit. I need to inspect the pipes." Elena glanced at her sink. No leak, but she opened the door anyway because she'd been raised to be polite and helpful and completely unprepared for the world her father actually lived in. 3 people pushed through the moment the lock disengaged. Elena stumbled backward, opening her mouth to scream. A hand clamped over her face. Something sharp pricked her neck. The world tilted. When she woke up, she was in the back of a van speeding through dark streets. Zip-tied, gagged, terrified. Across from her sat a man with steel-gray eyes and a face carved from stone. "I'm sorry," Lucian Draven said quietly, "but I need your father to believe I'm capable of hurting you, so this is going to be uncomfortable for a while." Elena tried to scream through the gag, tried to fight, but her body was still sluggish from whatever they'd injected her with. "I'm not going to hurt you," Lucian continued. "As long as your father cooperates, you'll be home in 24 hours, safe, unharmed, with a story you can never tell anyone." He reached over and pulled the gag down slightly so she could breathe better. "I'm going to call him now," Lucian said, "and you're going to scream, just once, loud enough that he believes you're in danger. Can you do that?" Elena stared at him. This man was famous, powerful, worth billions, and he'd just kidnapped her like some kind of terrorist. "If I don't," she managed, "then my pregnant fiancé dies, and our baby dies, and your father gets away with murder." Lucian's expression was ice. "So please, scream." He pulled the gag back down, dialed a number, put it on speaker. It rang twice. Then Victor Kane's voice filled the van. "Lucian, it's been 3 hours. I assume you're calling to tell me you've signed the papers." "I'm calling to tell you I have your daughter." Silence. Then, so cold it could freeze blood. "What did you say?" "Elena, I have her. And unless you release Celine in the next 2 hours, I'm going to start sending you pieces of her." "You're bluffing." Lucian looked at Elena, nodded. She screamed, high and terrified and absolutely genuine, because she was high and terrified and absolutely certain she was about to die. "Stop!" Kane's voice was ragged now, desperate. "Stop it! Don't hurt her!" Lucian gestured and someone put the gag back in Elena's mouth. "Now you know how it feels," Lucian said quietly, "to have someone you love held hostage by a monster. Welcome to my world, Victor. If you touch her, if you so much as bruise her, I will make you watch Celine die screaming. Then we both lose. Is that what you want?" "What I want is your head on a spike." "Get in line." Lucian's voice was steel. "Here's how this works. You release Celine, I release Elena. We both walk away and never speak again, or we both lose the people we love. Your choice." "You're not a killer, Draven." "You're right, I'm not. But I've hired people who are, and they're very good at making things hurt." He paused. "You have 2 hours. After that, Elena starts losing fingers. 1 per hour until Celine is back in my arms." "You're insane." "I'm desperate. There's a difference." Lucian's finger hovered over the end call button. 2 hours, Victor. Don't waste them." He hung up. The van went silent. Elena was crying now, mascara running down her face, whole body shaking. She'd never been so terrified in her life. Never imagined that the safe, comfortable world she lived in could shatter so completely in the span of 20 minutes. Lucian knelt in front of her. "I meant what I said. I'm not going to hurt you. But your father needs to believe I will. Do you understand?" Elena nodded. What else could she do? "Good." He stood up and addressed his team. "We hold position. Wait for Kane to call back. Be ready for anything." They waited. 10 minutes became 20, became 40, became an hour. Lucian's phone rang. "I want proof she's alive," Kane said. No preamble, no threats, just exhaustion. Lucian pulled the gag down again. "Tell him you're okay. Papa, Elena sobbed. Papa, I'm so scared. Please, just do what he says. Please. I will, Malishka. I promise. Just stay calm. You're going to be okay. Lucian pulled the gag back up and took the phone off speaker. Where's Celine? I'll tell you when I know Elena is safe. That's not how this works. It's the only way this works. Kane's control was fracturing now. You think I'm stupid enough to tell you where Celine is before I have my daughter back? The moment I do, you'll kill me and disappear with both of them. I give you my word. Your word means nothing to me. Lucian closed his eyes. This wasn't working. Kane was too smart, too experienced. He'd anticipated every move. Time for a different approach. What if we do it simultaneously? Lucien said. Public location. Both women released at the same time. You bring Celine, I bring Elena. We make the trade and walk away. Where? Grand Central Terminal, main concourse, 2 hours from now. Too many witnesses. Exactly. Which means neither of us can afford to start shooting. We make the trade clean and quiet and everyone goes home. Silence on the other end. Kane was thinking, calculating odds. Finally, 1 hour, not 2. And Lucien, if this is a trap, I will burn your entire world to ash. Understood. The line went dead. Lucien looked at his team. Grand Central, 1 hour, full tactical, non-lethal if possible. But if it comes down to saving Celine or preserving Kane's life, you save Celine. Are we clear? They nodded. The van started moving. Elena sat in the corner, still bound, still gagged, still terrified. But somewhere underneath the fear, a thought was forming. Her father was a monster. She'd always suspected the money that appeared from nowhere, the business trips to dangerous places, the way he'd taught her to fight and shoot and survive like he expected the world to try to kill her, but she'd never wanted to know for certain. Now she did. And it changed everything. Grand Central Terminal at midnight was almost empty. A few stragglers waiting for late trains, cleaning crews, transit police doing rounds. The vast main concourse, usually packed with thousands of commuters, was a cathedral of echoing silence. Lucien stood in the center, hands in his pockets, trying to look calm while his heart tried to punch through his ribs. His team was scattered throughout the building, invisible, ready. Elena stood beside him, no longer bound, no longer gagged, just scared. He'd promised her that in 1 hour, this would all be over and she'd never have to see him again. She'd nodded and hadn't said a word. At 12:05, the west entrance doors opened. Victor Kane walked through. He was alone. No visible weapons, no backup, just a tired old man walking across marble floors toward the son of the man he'd killed 3 decades ago. And behind him, supported by Maria Volkov, was Celine. Lucien's breath caught. She was alive, walking. Her hands were bound in front of her, but she was moving under her own power. Their eyes met across the concourse. She was crying. So was he. Kane stopped 20 feet away. Let her go first. Same time, Lucien said. They stared at each other for a long moment. Two men who'd spent decades destroying lives, now reduced to this, a desperate trade in an empty train station because they'd both made the mistake of loving someone. On 3, Kane said. Lucien nodded. 1. They both moved forward slightly. 2. Closer now. 10 feet apart. Celine and Elena both walking toward the center point. 3. They released simultaneously. Elena ran to her father. He caught her, held her, whispered something in Russian that Lucien couldn't hear. Celine stumbled into Lucien's arms. He caught her, pulled her close, felt her heart hammering against his chest. I'm here, he whispered. I've got you. You're safe. Lucien, don't talk. Just breathe. The gunshot split the air like a thunderclap. Lucien's world exploded into chaos. His team materialized from shadows, weapons drawn. Kane was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his shirt. Maria Volkov was aiming a pistol at Celine. Nobody move, Maria screamed. Nobody fucking move or I put a bullet in her head. Everything froze. Maria had positioned herself behind Celine, one arm wrapped around her throat, gun pressed to her temple. Her eyes were wild, desperate. Maria, Kane gasped from the ground. What are you doing? What I should have done 3 months ago. Finishing the job. She looked at Lucien. You think you're so smart. Think you can just take everything from us and walk away. But you're wrong. You killed my husband. Remember that? Gerald Hutchins. You destroyed him and he killed himself in prison last week. So now I'm going to take everything from you. Lucien's hands were up, placating. Maria, this isn't it. Shut up! Her finger tightened on the trigger. You don't get to talk. You don't get to negotiate. You just get to watch while I... Elena moved. She'd been standing beside her father, ignored, invisible. Just a terrified girl nobody was paying attention to. She grabbed the gun from Kane's shoulder holster and fired. The shot hit Maria center mass. Maria's eyes went wide. Her grip on Celine loosened. She staggered backward, gun falling from her hands. Celine dove away. Maria collapsed. And suddenly the concourse was full of police. Real police this time. Flooding in from every entrance, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Someone had called them. Maybe one of the cleaning crews, maybe a late-night commuter who'd heard gunshots. It didn't matter. Lucien grabbed Celine and ran. They made it 3 steps before a cop tackled him to the ground. Celine screamed. Someone pulled her away. Lucien was shouting, fighting, trying to get back to her. She's pregnant. Don't hurt her. Please, she's... Something hard connected with the back of his skull. Everything went dark. Attacked. Lucien woke up in a hospital bed. Handcuffed to the railing, head pounding, vision blurry. A police officer sitting in a chair by the door. Where's Celine? His voice was gravel. The cop didn't answer. Lucien tried to sit up. The handcuffs bit into his wrist. Where is she? Is she okay? Is the baby... Calm down, Mr. Draven. I need to know if she's okay. The door opened. A woman in a dark suit walked in. FBI, based on the badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Draven, she said. I'm Special Agent Morrison. We need to talk. I need to know if Celine Vale is alive. She's fine. In surgery right now. The bullet grazed her arm, but she's stable. Baby's fine too. Relief crashed through Lucien so hard he nearly blacked out again. Thank you. Thank you. Morrison pulled up a chair. We've been investigating Victor Kane for 8 years. Money laundering, racketeering, murder for hire. We had nothing that would stick until tonight. She paused. Elena Kane is cooperating, gave us everything. Bank records, communications, witness testimony about her father's operation, in exchange for immunity. And Kane? Alive. In custody. Looking at life in prison, minimum. Lucien closed his eyes. It's over. Not quite. We still have questions about your involvement, about the kidnapping, about the illegal surveillance, about... I'll tell you everything, Lucien said. Every detail. But first I need to see Celine, please. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded to the cop by the door. The handcuffs came off. She's in room 407, Morrison said. You have 10 minutes. Then we talk. Lucien was already moving. He found Celine's room on the 4th floor. She was awake, sitting up in bed, left arm bandaged. She looked pale, exhausted, beautiful. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Lucien crossed the room, sat on the edge of her bed, and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder and started sobbing, not quiet tears, full-body sobs that shook them both. I thought I lost you, Lucien whispered. I thought... I know. Me too. They held each other until the tears stopped, until breathing became easier, until the world stopped feeling like it was ending. Finally, Celine pulled back. Is it really over? Kane's in custody. Elena turned on him. He's done. And us? Are we going to prison? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. He touched her stomach gently. But we're alive. And that's all that matters. Celine covered his hand with hers. What happens now? Now we figure out how to survive the aftermath. The FBI investigation took 3 months. Lucien cooperated fully, turned over every document, explained every decision, took responsibility for the kidnapping, the illegal surveillance, everything. In the end, they charged him with multiple felonies: kidnapping, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. His lawyers negotiated a plea deal, 5 years in a minimum security facility. eligible for parole in 3. Celine was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony against both Kane and Lucien. She hated it. Hated having to sit in a courtroom and describe everything Lucien had done. Hated watching them lead him away in handcuffs. But she did it anyway, because their baby needed at least one parent who wasn't in prison. Victor Kahn died in prison 4 months into his sentence. Heart attack. They said it was natural causes, but Lucien suspected otherwise. Men like Kane had enemies, and eventually those enemies caught up. Elena Kane changed her name, moved to Vienna, kept playing piano. Sent Celine a card when the baby was born, a girl, 7 pounds 3 ounces, named Iris, with a simple note, "I'm sorry for everything. Thank you for saving my father, even though he didn't deserve it. I hope your daughter grows up in a better world than we inherited." Celine kept the card. Lucien served 27 months. He was a model prisoner, quiet, kept to himself. Spent most of his time reading or teaching other inmates about financial literacy. Celine visited every week, brought Iris when she was old enough. They'd sit in the visitation room and Lucien would hold his daughter through prison glass, tears streaming down his face, promising her he'd be home soon. When he was finally released, Celine was waiting at the gate. She'd sold his penthouse, liquidated most of his assets, used the money to start a nonprofit focused on criminal justice reform and supporting families affected by financial crime. They lived in a modest brownstone in Brooklyn. No servants, no security detail, just 2 people trying to build something normal from the wreckage of their past. It was harder than either of them expected. Lucien struggled with the loss of power, the loss of purpose. He'd spent 20 years being the most dangerous man in the room. Now he was just another ex-convict trying to reintegrate. Celine struggled with trust, with nightmares, with the constant fear that someone else would come for them. But they worked at it, went to therapy, learned how to talk about the things that hurt, learned how to be present for each other and for Iris instead of constantly bracing for the next crisis. 3 years after Lucien's release, they got married. Small ceremony, courthouse. Just the 2 of them and Iris, who was 5 years old and insisted on wearing a princess dress. The judge who married them was the same one who'd sentenced Lucien. She looked at them for a long moment before starting the ceremony. "I've seen a lot of couples stand before me," she said, "but I've never seen 2 people fight harder to be together. I don't know if that makes you brave or stupid, but I hope it works out." It did. Slowly. Imperfectly. With setbacks and arguments and days when they both wondered if they'd made the right choice. But it worked. 10 years later, Celine stood in the library of their brownstone watching rain streak down the windows. Iris was upstairs doing homework. Lucien was in his study, working on a memoir his publisher had been begging him to write for years. The house smelled like coffee and old books. The radiator clanged. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with life. Normal life. Safe life. The kind of life Celine had once thought she wanted. She'd been wrong about that. Safety wasn't about avoiding danger. It was about choosing who you'd face danger with. About building something strong enough to weather the storms. Lucien appeared in the doorway, reading, glasses perched on his nose, looking older and softer and more human than the man she'd met 13 years ago. "Iris wants to know if we can get a dog," he said. "We talked about this. No dogs." I told her that. She's writing a persuasive essay about why we're wrong. It's actually pretty good. Celine laughed. "She gets that from you." "The stubbornness or the strategic thinking?" "Both." Lucien crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. They stood like that for a while, watching rain turn Brooklyn into a watercolor painting. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Everything that happened. Everything we lost." Celine thought about it. About Adrian. About the life she could have had. Safe. Simple. Small. "No," she said. "I don't." "Even the parts where we almost died?" "Even those." She turned in his arms to face him. "We survived, Lucien, against impossible odds, and we built something real from the ashes. That's not something to regret." He kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I know." "Still terrifying." "Good. That means you're still paying attention." They stood in the library holding each other while rain hammered against the windows, and Iris shouted from upstairs that she'd finished her essay and it was 12 pages long, and if they didn't read it immediately, she was going to start a petition. Lucien groaned. 12 pages about a dog. She's your daughter. She's our daughter, which means you're helping me read this thing. They went upstairs together. Read Iris's absurdly detailed proposal for why they needed a golden retriever named Captain Pancakes. Tried not to laugh. Failed completely. That night, after Iris was asleep, Celine and Lucien sat on the roof deck of their brownstone watching the city lights blur through the rain. We should probably get her the dog, Lucien Chichapicien said. Probably. Captain Pancakes is a terrible name. The worst. She's going to be insufferable when she wins. She learned that from you too. Lucien pulled Celine closer. You know what the scariest part is? What? I'm happy. Actually happy. I didn't think I was capable of it. Celine looked at him, at the gray threading through his hair, at the lines around his eyes, at the face she'd loved for over a decade through chaos and catastrophe and everything in between. You're capable of a lot of things, Lucien Draven, including being happy. Because of you. Because of us. They sat on that roof until the rain stopped and the city settled into its restless sleep. And for the first time in either of their lives, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It just felt like peace. Somewhere in Vienna, Elena Volkov, formerly Kane, finished a concert to thunderous applause and thought about the family she'd lost and the life she'd chosen instead. Somewhere in a cemetery in Connecticut, Marcus Thorne's gravestone stood silent under the stars, his son's vendetta finally complete after 32 years. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a brownstone with a leaky roof and a radiator that clanged, two people who'd chosen each other over safety finally learned what it meant to come home. The war was over. They'd survived. And that was enough.